The sun was bright, the sky clear, and the water perfectly still, my favorite kind of morning. Living beside my private lake had always been the one thing that made every stressful week bearable. The calm ripples, the soft breeze, and the way the sunlight danced on the surface felt like therapy that no doctor could prescribe. That morning, I stepped out of my cabin, kicked off my sandals, and walked down to the wooden dock. The boards were warm under my feet, and the lake looked like a polished mirror. I stretched, took a deep breath, and dove into the water. It was cold in the best way, refreshing, awakening, and familiar. I swam slow, easy laps near the shore, enjoying the peace that came with owning your own piece of nature. There were no strangers, no boats, no noise. Just me and the quiet world around me. Or so I thought. As soon as I climbed back onto the dock, shaking water from my hair, I heard it, the sharp, irritated voice that had become a regular irritation in my life. "Oh, so this is what you've been doing." I closed my eyes for a second before turning around. There she was, Karen, the HOA president, the self-appointed protector of community standards, and the biggest headache any neighborhood could ever have. She stood at the edge of my property line, hands on her hips, lips pursed so tightly they practically disappeared. Today she wore her usual uniform, a visor, oversized sunglasses, and an attitude bigger than the lake itself. "Morning, Karen," I said, grabbing my towel. "Can I help you?" "You certainly can," she said, stepping closer as if she had any right to be on my land. "Do you know you're violating HOA guidelines by swimming in that lake?" I paused mid-wipe. "This lake?" "Yes, this lake," she snapped, waving a clipboard full of papers as if it was some holy scripture. "It is strictly against HOA rules to swim without approved flotation devices, safety supervision, and notice to the board." I slowly blinked at her. "Karen, the lake belongs to me. It's on my property." "Yes," she said dramatically, "but the water is still part of the community's natural resources." I stared at her in disbelief. Was she serious? She was. Her face said it all. I tried to stay calm. "Karen, this lake isn't a community pond. I bought this land. I own the shoreline, the dock, and the water rights. The HOA doesn't control this." "Actually," she huffed, flipping through her papers with the enthusiasm of someone searching for an excuse to ruin someone's day, "we have established rules about activities that affect the view and use of natural spaces." "The view," I repeated slowly. "Me swimming affects the view?" "Yes," she shouted. "Your activity may cause disturbances. People can see you from the trail. It's inappropriate. And, frankly, it sets a bad example." I had lived here for 8 years. Never once had anyone complained. But Karen had moved in only 4 months ago, and ever since, the neighborhood had felt like a war zone of petty complaints, new rules, surprise inspections, and her constant belief that she ran the entire town. She thrust her clipboard in my face. "I'm issuing you a fine of $1,000 for violating HOA Code 12B, unauthorized recreational water activity." "What?" I laughed. "You're fining me $1,000 for swimming on my own property?" "Correct," she said proudly, handing me the bright yellow slip. "Payment is due within 7 days. Further violations will result in escalating penalties." I stared at the paper. $1,000 for swimming in my lake. "Karen," I said slowly, "you can't do this." "Oh, I can," she sang, spinning around with her nose in the air. "And I will. And if you don't like it, you're welcome to bring it up at the next HOA meeting." She marched away, leaving me standing on my dock, dripping water, holding a ridiculous fine that felt more like an insult than a rule. I looked at the slip again. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't something symbolic. It was an actual, enforceable fine, at least according to her. I sighed and walked back to my cabin, already feeling the irritation building in my chest. This woman had been nitpicking everything for months: trash bins, yard length, mailbox color, even how fast I closed my garage door. But this was another level. I hung my towel, sat down at the kitchen table, and stared at the fine. I could pay it. I had the money. But that wasn't the point. The point was simple. It was my lake. She had no authority over it. So, instead of paying the fine like a helpless victim, I opened my old file drawer, the one I rarely touched, and pulled out the thick folder labeled Property Deed and Water Rights Agreement. I hadn't looked at it since the day I closed on the property, but now I read every page carefully. The documents clearly stated that the lake was fully contained within my land boundaries. The water rights came with the purchase. I had exclusive control over all usage, activities, and maintenance. The WA wasn't even mentioned anywhere. A slow smile spread across my face. Karen hadn't just overstepped. She had launched herself miles past her authority. The next morning, I walked to the WA office, a small building that Karen had decorated with motivational posters and passive-aggressive signs about community responsibility. Her desk was piled with files. She looked up with her usual annoyed expression. "What do you want now?" she said. "I'm here about the fine," I replied, placing my deed folder on her desk. "Oh good," she said smugly. "Ready to pay your penalty?" "No," I said, opening the folder to the water rights page. "I'm here to show you that the lake belongs entirely to me. The WA has no authority over it. Your fine is invalid." She snatched the paper, skimmed it, frowned, then read it again. Her confidence flickered. But Karen being Karen, she wasn't going down without a fight. "This can't be right," she said stiffly. "These documents are old. They're legally binding," I said. "Older than the WA itself." She clenched her jaw. "Well, we still have rules regarding community aesthetics and shared natural spaces." "The lake isn't shared," I said. "It's mine. But people can see it," she argued, grasping at straws. "And they can see my mailbox too," I replied. "Does that mean you control that as well?" She sputtered. For the first time, Karen didn't have a comeback ready. I leaned closer. "Karen, you issued an illegal fine. I'm not paying it, and if you try to enforce it, I'll bring this to the county." Her face drained of color. I picked up the fine and slowly tore it in half right in front of her. Her eyes widened in horror. You can't do that," she shrieked. "I just did," I said calmly. I tucked my documents back into my folder, gave her a polite smile, and walked out. Behind me, I heard her muttering and flipping through papers desperately, but nothing she said mattered. She knew she had crossed the line. And she knew she couldn't win this one. That afternoon, I went for another swim, longer this time, more peaceful, more satisfying, because I knew that no fake rule, no angry WA president, and no petty complaint could take this lake away from me. And as I floated on my back, staring at the clear blue sky, I thought, if Karen wants a battle, she just picked the wrong lake. I didn't sleep well the night Karen slapped that ridiculous $1,000 fine into my hand. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smug smile, heard her condescending voice, and felt the sting of pure injustice burning in my chest. Who finds a man for swimming in his own lake? By sunrise, I was pacing the cabin floor like a caged wolf. I lived here for peace, for freedom, for escape from the noise of life, and ever since Karen moved into the neighborhood, peace had become a memory. Trash cans an inch out of place. Complaint. Grass slightly longer after a rainy week. Violation. Mail truck parked for too long. Warning letter. And now this. A $1,000 fine for taking a swim on my property. No. Enough was enough. Something in me shifted that morning, an anger that wasn't loud or explosive, but cold, steady, and sharp. The kind of anger that pushes a man to stop being patient and start being precise. I went to the old filing cabinet in my study. Dust coated the metal handles. I hadn't opened the bottom drawer in years. But inside was the one thing I needed. My original property deed. I sat down at the table, spread out the documents, and began searching. The paper was slightly yellowed, crisp at the edges, but the text was clear. Page 5. Water Rights Agreement. The moment I saw the heading, my pulse steadied. I read each line slowly, carefully. This parcel includes full ownership of the lake, shoreline, and water rights within boundaries described below. I leaned back. Full ownership. Not partial. Not shared. Not conditional. Full. The next paragraph was even stronger. No homeowners association, future or existing, shall impose rules, restrictions, or oversight upon the lake, its usage, or any activities conducted within its defined boundaries. A laugh, half disbelief, half satisfaction, escaped my lips. There it was. In legal print. Signed. Stamped. Recorded. My lake was untouchable. Karen's precious WA, powerless. I flipped through the remaining pages just to make sure I hadn't missed anything. There were maps, measurements, even an engineer's sketch showing the lake fully inside my land. Not a single WA clause appeared anywhere. I pressed my palms together and exhaled slowly. So Karen hadn't just made a mistake. She had waged a war she couldn't legally fight. But that wasn't enough. I needed proof. Paperwork. Backup. I needed the kind of preparation Karen couldn't argue with. For the next 3 hours, I worked like a man possessed. I printed fresh copies of the deed. I highlighted every line supporting my claim. I tabbed the pages with bright labels. I scanned everything into digital files. I even cross-checked county maps to confirm the shoreline boundaries. By the end of it, my table looked like the desk of a lawyer preparing for court. And maybe that's exactly what I would have to do. Just as I finished organizing the documents, I heard a sharp knock on the door. Of course, it was Karen. I opened the door and found her standing with that same judgmental tilt to her chin. I wanted to make sure you understood the fine, she said without greeting. It must be paid within 6 days now. Failure to do so will result in penalties. I held her gaze, silent. And, she added, I must insist you refrain from any further swimming until you are back in compliance with HOA standards. She spoke like a queen issuing decrees to peasants. I stepped aside. Come in. She hesitated, eyes narrowing, but curiosity got the better of her. She walked inside, scanning my cabin like she expected to find contraband life jackets or illegal water. I pointed at the table. Her face froze. What is all this? She asked. Proof, I said calmly. Sit. She didn't sit. She stood stiffly, arms crossed. So I began. Here is the original deed, I said, tapping the folder. Here are the water rights. Here is the map showing the lake fully within my boundaries. Here is the clause stating no homeowners association can impose rules on the lake. Karen's lips parted slightly. Her sunglasses slid down her nose. She read the first page. Then the second. Her eyes moved faster, darting between lines, searching for something, anything, to give her power. There was nothing. This can't be correct, she whispered. It's legally binding, I replied. Older than your HOA, recognized by the county, registered at the courthouse. She swallowed hard. I pushed the highlighted page toward her. You fined me for swimming in a lake I legally own. A lake your HOA has no authority over. She pushed the papers back as if they burned her fingertips. Well, she stammered, there must be some misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said firmly. You tried to exert authority you don't have. She stepped back, defensive. I was only enforcing community safety. By fining me $1,000. I asked. For swimming in water you don't control. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Karen, I said, my voice calm but unshakable, you stepped onto private property and attempted to enforce a rule that doesn't apply. That's illegal. She froze. I leaned forward slightly. Do you know what happens when an HOA president knowingly issues unlawful fines? Her face went pale. I could take this to the county, I continued. I could file a harassment complaint. I could pursue damages. Or, I paused, letting the silence settle like fog, I could simply ask that you withdraw the fine and stay off my property from now on. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she grabbed her clipboard and scribbled furiously. This incident is rescinded, she muttered. The fine is void. I nodded. Good. She practically fled my cabin, her visor slightly crooked from the panic. The moment she disappeared down the trail, I exhaled, slow and deep. I stepped outside, the cool air brushing my skin, and walked down toward the lake. The water was calm again. Quiet. Mine. I sat on the dock, feet dangling, watching dragonflies skim the surface. Karen had messed with the wrong man this time. She thought she could bully, intimidate, and control everyone with her stack of rules and her plastic authority. But authority means nothing without real power behind it. And the lake, my lake, it wasn't just a body of water. It was a line she was never meant to cross. I dipped my foot into the water, smiling. Then I stood, took a breath, and dove in, smooth and clean. Not hiding, not asking permission, not apologizing, because the truth was simple. She had no power here. Not legally, not morally, not in any sense that mattered. And as I floated on my back, sun warming my face, I knew this wasn't the end. Karen wouldn't give up easily. People like her never do. But I also knew something else, something far more important. Next time she pushed, I'd be ready. Karen had always been a thorn in everyone's side, but after she tried to fine me $1,000 for swimming in my own lake, a lake she had zero authority over, something inside me switched. Defending myself wasn't enough anymore. She needed to learn. She needed consequences. She needed a reminder that power doesn't come from a clipboard, a visor, or a loud voice. Real power comes from truth, ownership, and law. And I had all three. For years, the HOA had been practically harmless. They handled trash schedules, holiday events, and occasionally sent reminders about lawn care. Nothing serious. But after Karen became president, the HOA turned into a weapon, and she used it like a queen punishing peasants. People were scared of her. They whispered about her rules, her punishments, her nosy inspections. They accepted her behavior because they thought she had ultimate authority. But I knew better. And now I had proof. After showing Karen the deed and watching her face collapse into panic, I spent the next 2 days reading every single legal document the HOA had ever filed. I went through the covenants, the bylaws, the amendments, the fee structures, everything. And that's when I found the golden sentence. A single line buried in an old financing agreement. Any landowner owning more than 20% of neighborhood property reserves the right to adjust HOA fees at their discretion after providing written notice. My eyes narrowed. I owned the lake, the land surrounding the lake, the private trail, the access road, added together, 24.7%. I almost laughed. Karen had been playing a game she didn't understand, and I'd been holding the winning card for 7 years without realizing it. That night, I drafted the letter. Clear, professional, cold, legal. I printed copies, signed them, stamped them, placed them in envelopes, and at sunrise the next morning, I walked door to door and delivered each one personally. Some neighbors opened their doors. Some peeked through windows. Some ignored me entirely. It didn't matter. I wasn't doing this for their approval. I was doing it because someone had to stand up to Karen, publicly, loudly, and permanently. By noon, the neighborhood was buzzing. Message groups exploded. People were texting, calling, gathering on sidewalks. I stepped out onto my porch with a cup of coffee and enjoyed the chaos like watching fireworks from a distance. Finally, at 3:17 p.m. sharp, I got the message I had been waiting for. Emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance. Karen had taken the bait. And she was angry. When I arrived at the community center, the room was packed. Every chair taken, people standing against the walls. Voices loud and nervous. Karen sat at the front, red-faced, clutching a folder so tightly her knuckles were white. She slammed her gavel down. This meeting has been called to address an outrageous and unauthorized document distributed by, she glared at me, this resident. The room erupted in whispers. I didn't flinch. With your permission, I said calmly, stepping forward, I'd like to explain. You have no authority to speak, she snapped. I raised an eyebrow. Then I placed my copied documents on the table. Actually, I said, projecting my voice so the whole room could hear, I have more authority than this entire HOA. Gasps. Whispers. Karen's mouth dropped open. I opened the binder and pointed. This neighborhood's original agreement, Section 8, Subsection D, clearly states that any landowner holding more than 20% of neighborhood property may legally adjust HOA fees. I paused for effect. That landowner is me. The room went silent. Karen sputtered, that clause is outdated. It doesn't apply anymore. I slid forward the certified copy. Stamped by the county. It was never revoked. Never amended. Still active. Her face turned pale. I turned to the crowd. Many of you have been bullied. Fined. Harassed. All because Karen believes she has absolute authority. But the truth is, I lifted the document. She has no more power than any of you. A few people nodded. Someone clapped softly. Someone else muttered, finally. Karen slammed her fist onto the table. This is ridiculous. You can't do this. You're abusing a technicality. Karen, I said, you fined me $1,000 for swimming in my own lake. You entered my property without permission. You misused your authority. She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't finished. So yes, I continued, I exercised my rights. I adjusted the fees. Legally. I held up the final page, the one they had all read this morning. Effective immediately, HOA fees will increase by $5,000 for each residence. The room exploded. What? No way. Is he serious? You can't do that. Karen stood up so fast her chair toppled. You're insane. You're a tyrant. You can't possibly expect anyone to pay that. I waited patiently. The noise died down. Then I spoke calmly, clearly, and with enough force that every person in the room felt it. I'm not raising the fees permanently. I'm raising them until Karen resigns. The room froze. Karen's eyes widened in horror. If she steps down, I said, I'll revert the fees back to normal. Immediately. No one pays $1. Gasps. Shock. Hope. I continued. But if she stays. I paused. You all pay the extra $5,000 every year. Karen grabbed her papers. You can't blackmail us. This isn't blackmail, I replied. It's accountability. A neighbor raised his hand. Is he allowed to do this? I handed him a copy of the clause. He read it, nodded slowly. It's legal, he said. It's completely legal. The crowd murmured. Karen looked around, and finally realized something terrifying. Everyone hated her. Every neighbor she'd insulted. Every family she'd fined. Every child she'd lectured. Every homeowner she'd threatened. They weren't on her side. Not anymore. Not ever again. A trembling woman in the back stood up. I want her gone. Then a man raised his hand. Same here. Then more hands. And more. And more. In less than 30 seconds, over half the neighborhood was voting her out. Karen's voice cracked. This is a witch hunt. No, someone said, this is justice. She stared at me, furious, helpless, defeated. You'll regret this, she whispered. I held her gaze. Not as much as you're regretting it right now. Dash dash dash. She resigned on the spot. Crying, throwing her papers, storming out. The moment the door slammed, applause shook the entire room. People were laughing, cheering, shaking my hand, thanking me. And I felt lighter than I had in months. I signed one more document, the one nullifying the fee increase. Neighbors sighed in relief. A few hugged me. Then I walked out into the sunlight, heading down the familiar trail toward my lake. The water shimmered like it knew I had won. I kicked off my shoes, stepped onto the dock, and dove right in, smooth and perfect. No fines. No rules. No Karen. Just peace. My lake. My land. My freedom. And one undeniable truth. When you try to drown a man in his own water, don't be surprised when he learns to swim and pulls you under instead.